Bueno, bandita, aquí andamos recorriendo y caminando por la ciudad de Chicago. Vamos a ver qué podemos encontrar para poderles enseñar, mi gente, así es que saludos. Si tienes la oportunidad de venir a Chicago, no te puedes perder el tour por el ferry por el río Chicago, ya que puede ser una experiencia emocionante, única aquí de la ciudad. Mientras caminamos para ver si podemos abordar ese tour, esto es lo que se puede ver, esto es las impresionantes vistas de aquí de la ciudad de Chicago. Bueno, mi gente, sin más que decir y sin más que comentar, quiero hacerles una invitación a que se suscriban en mi canal, que comenten, que compartan, que le den like, que bajen su campanita de notificaciones para que cuando yo suba un video les notifique y lo compartan, así ustedes me ayudan. Vamos a ir a ver, vamos a ir a tratar de vivir una aventura, así es que vamos para allá, mi gente. Para este tour generalmente llegas al muelle de partida, ubicado en el centro de la ciudad, cerca de la orilla del río. Compras tu boleto y esperas en la zona del embarque. Mientras esperas puedes disfrutar de las vistas del río y de la ciudad. Aquí ya tenemos todo listo, subimos al ferry, buscamos un asiento cómodo y que tenga las mejores vistas. El ferry zarpa y comienza a navegar por el río, ofreciendo unas vistas impresionantes de la ciudad. El guía turístico empieza a narrar la historia y los puntos de interés de la ciudad mientras el ferry navega por el río. Mientras zarpamos por el tour, por el recorrido que durará de aproximadamente de 1 hora y media por el río, tenemos estas impresionantes imágenes de aquí de la ciudad y como es un atardecer, pues se mira increíble. Durante el recorrido del tour podremos ver algunos de los puntos más interesantes y emblemáticos de la ciudad, como el rascacielos William Towers, antiguamente conocido como el Sears Towers, el edificio del Tribune Towers, el puente del Colegio Michigan, el Parque Milenio. El guía turístico nos proporcionará información sobre estos puntos interesantes. Ya el guía turístico ya empezó a mencionar algunos de los puntos, pero hay que escucharlo, así es que vamos a escucharlo porque no puedo hacer mucho ruido, mi gente. Espero disfruten el recorrido, aunque sea por video, que le den like, que comenten y que compartan. Ahí los dejo en el video.
We have an entirely new neighborhood called Kinsey Park. This sets back about 30 feet from the river to include these public promenades with the riverwalk and landscaping. The city of Chicago, developers and residents are no longer looking at the river as being that nasty little stream. We're trying to embrace it and view it as the city's second waterfront. And the quality of the water in the river has dramatically improved over the last half century. From being highly toxic to just polluted. So we are working on it slowly but surely. Complex to our left look like 1998 to 2001. Yes, they're nice. My problem is copy cut, paste, copy cut, paste, copy cut, paste, copy cut, paste. Don't go home drunk and don't know which one is yours. As we turn a nice view of the downtown skyline to our left, to our south, we'll pick up momentarily. Real fast, that's rental, that's rental, that's rental. The little square one back there, they have 7 penthouses. 2 of them are duplexes with 4,000 square feet inside, 2,000 square feet outside, only for 30 grand a month.
Oh my God.
And they're occupied. Not by me, but they're occupied. And before you ask me, the townhomes in front along the river's edge cost the most, like $2 to $2.3 million. On average, like 4,000 square feet, but they have all 4 levels. The background slightly smaller. Back there, on average, like 3,000 square feet. And some of our prices back there, about $850, roughly starting. Up next, the bridge. Don't forget you have a lease at the bar downstairs. Go by there for a while. If you get cold, get a shot of Jack Daniels. Won't be cold anymore. I promise. Or a blanket, she has those for sale too. Now that we're past that, all that, I'll pick up once again. So the wooden posts around all these bridges are called pilings, and they're clustered like this, they're called dolphins. They help protect the mechanics and structure of the bridges. Back in 1992, they were replacing some of the pilings around this bridge because of age and rot. And what happened was, they accidentally drove one of those pilings too far to the river, cracking the roof of an old freight tunnel that goes under the corner of the bridge. Eventually, the roof of the freight tunnel gave way, causing millions of gallons of river water to rush and flood the tunnels, flooding almost all the basements downtown. Cost more than $1 billion to clean up. I have never ever in my short life seen this bridge down. The reason they keep it up when it is closed, the clearance here is only about 4 feet, but they have to have it manned 24/7. 1908, Chicago Northwestern Railway Company will not be torn down, has been landmarked. Concrete counterweight was more than 1,200 tons. Then at this slender slip of a building here to our right called River Bend, 2003. Some townhomes and mansionettes along the base, but then a few floors of parking, but that the tower units. You can see how skinny the building is. The reason it is so slender, you have train tracks that curve around the back side, causing that piece of land to be very narrow. So tight, there was not enough room to construct ramps to access the garage. But in the garages, you need a wide turning radius. So instead, they designed elevators in that space to lift the cars out of the floors where they're parked. Again, all valet. Concave, convex. Taking this boat tour 10 years ago, would have no problem seeing the train tracks to our right. Of course, still there, it's been decked over with that plaza and 50-story tall building called River Point. Have time while you're here, visit that space. You're elevated for great views to our left or east down that canyon. That's nice lighting right now. The dark glass building right in front, lantern on top, just sits on a very historic site. Back in 1860, a temporary building stood on that site called the Wigwam. That was the very first ever Republican National Convention where Abraham Lincoln was nominated. Now, here to our right, the building draws everyone's attention. Total diva of this area, 150 North Riverside by Getch Partners, architecture firm headquartered here. Building itself, a pretty good example of form follows function. The site helps to dictate the shape and design of the building. So here, a very slender piece of land to work with. You're wedged in between a river and train tracks. Had a conventional office building been designed where the columns come straight down. On this side, those columns will slam along the river's edge. On the other side, to the train tracks. This is called a core supported building. The main central concrete core takes on the weight and load of the tower. Those diagonal beams transfer that load. Example, pull my arm up from my body, push down on my hand, it's going to fall right to my thigh. If there's a bar from my palm to my waist, you can't push down. Same general concept with the diagonals. Building itself finished in 2017. We'll tell you more on the return trip. Ever have time while you're here, walk through that space. Now, as we clear Randolph, here to our left, about 5.5, 6 years ago, a 5-story building in the mid-1950s. Thankfully, it's been torn down, and its weight now rises. A 55-story tall building, 110 North Wacker by Getch Partners. Same firm, the people with a very cool base. Building it to our left, also a very dynamic base. Finished in 2020, last I have read, between like 90 and 95% leased up. Right now, largest tenant is Bank of America. They took more than 500,000 square feet. Here to our left is Bank of America Tower. And here's a picture of the building stood on this site that I took before it got torn down. I don't miss it, and neither do you, because it was ugly. It was. So as we clear Washington and enter this Art Deco canyon, to our left coming up, the Civic Opera Building by Graham Anderson, Probst and White. Limestone cladding and setbacks as the building rises. Do notice it kind of reminds you of a giant chair or a throne. Seat portion of the theater and stage, the wings of the building are the armrest, the tower, your backrest. No, of course, it did not misspell building, that's Latin. Chiseled here in my lifetime. Blank wall to our left, bit more than 20 years ago, some minor consideration about perhaps showing movies on the wall for watching the plaza across the way. Nothing materialized. Gonna have some carvings here and more carvings above of comedy and tragedy. It was tragic that $20 million building opened up November 4th, 1929. A few days after the stock market crash, leading to the Great Depression, Civic Opera went bankrupt soon after. It's now home to the Lyric Opera, very successful. Back to our right. So around here, you can see below the next set of buildings, not to the basement, to the train tracks. All the buildings to our right along the river's edge are built atop air rights. And that means the developers bought the air above the train tracks from the railroad companies to build and develop buildings above that space. Very common in big cities. Huge project right now being built in Manhattan called Hudson Yards, all on air rights. Gonna have Gateway Centers 1 and 2, 65, 67, black box modern, Skidmore. Background to our right, green glass, black cladding, slope roof, modern, 83, Skidmore. Taller stone clad building to our right, postmodern, 92, Skidmore. So all four buildings by the same firm, 65 to 92. And evolution of architecture by one firm over 30 years. So again, tracks below go to and from Union Station, a short, classically inspired building about a quarter of a block to our right, next gap, 1925. I know that most of you all aren't from Chicago, but some of you all, especially adults of a certain age, have seen some of these buildings on TV before, but you may not realize it. If any of you all have ever seen The Untouchables, 1987, Sean Connery, Kevin Costner, there's a scene at the end of the baby stroller falling on the stair steps in a shootout that was filmed in the Great Hall of Union Station. Very nice public space. Over halftime, check it out. Adams Street, aka Route 66. And at one time, a beautiful grand concourse of the train station stood directly here to our right. But in the name of modernization, it was foolishly torn down back in 1969 and replaced with the mediocre Gateway Center 3, 1971. Three-story building to our right now houses a health club and corner bakery. Initially, Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And back then, pre-computer, have an exchange, had a big old trading floor. There those big trading floors that did not like a lot of interior support columns that would get in the way. Instead of using interior supports, the exits around the outside do the majority of the supporting. X-bracing, just like the John Hancock Center on North Michigan Avenue. John Hancock is vertical, that's horizontal. Now we'll discuss the building to our left, small red dot, on the return trip. But as we clear Jackson to our right, the fourth and final of the Gateway buildings from 1983 by Jim DeStefano, who at that time worked for Skidmore. Again, pretty good example of architectural contextualism. The building fits into the site and surrounding. A graceful curve in the facade, a slight bend in the river in front of us. Green glass of the building, green water of the river. I know at least a third of you all at one point in the past 14, 15 years have possibly seen The Dark Knight, the Batman movie made in Chicago. Opening scene, Joker and his gang are gonna rob Gotham Bank. They bust out a window in the office building to our right. Use a zip line on the rooftop of Gotham Bank where they bust them with the school bus. That's next, but in reality, the former main post office for the city of Chicago, built in phases and finally completed in 1932. Art Deco, Graham Anderson, probed in white. It was the world's busiest and biggest post office. Chicago needed the biggest, but with the mail order and catalog capital of the world with stores like Sears, Marshall Field, Montgomery Ward. We're talking roughly 2.7 million square feet of space, about 62 acres are under one roof, the perfect spot on top of train tracks. Building itself decommissioned back in '96 and sat empty for more than 2 decades. It was purchased back in 2016, so undergone a roughly $800 million rehab, and last I have read, between like 90 and 95% leased up, is now office space. The building is also now LEED certified, green technology in 1 second, cars. Top, there are 3 15-acre green roof only for the tenants with a basketball court, walking path, half-mile jogging path. I'm not yet sure the small building to our right, a game of wait and see, but it's owned by the same firm. As we clear Harrison to our right coming up, the newer main post office, 1996, not worth your nor my time, so don't worry about it. Later to our left coming up on this vacant and broke down land, at least it used to be, until 1971 was all railroad land. There's a very nice train station to our left on that corner, Grand Central Station, 1890, 1971. About 10 years ago, two different developers did team up and bought most of the land to our left from the bridge above us to the one in front of us. They had like 14 acres, a lot for any city. About 8 years ago, they submitted a master plan to the city which called for the redevelopment of that land. On all those acres, they can now build roughly 3,600 residential units. The project initially was called Riverline by Perkins and Will. So far, 2 buildings have been finished. To our left coming up, the Cooper, that is rental. In front to our left, the Reed, 41 floors, half condo, half rental. Have time while you're here, visit the space here to our left, very pretty and peaceful. Stones here to our left are reclaimed foundation stones from the train station, dug up from that site and reused for the Riverwalk. And I will be honest, I'm not that big of a fan of the Reed architecturally because of the parking base. Now, initial plans call for 2-story duplexes, like we see there to our left in the background on the Cooper. But for this one, we have 4 floors of parking on green space in the river. Not a fan of that. Their lobby is nice though. Underground parking next to water is very, very expensive. Until 1972, a bridge did span the river this location at Polk Street. Still see the abutments on either side. And here to our left, we're gonna have River City. It may remind you of a complex we saw like 15 minutes ago, Marina City. If it does, it should. Designed by the same architect, Bertrand Goldberg. The building here to our left is 20 years on that land. We can now build roughly 13 million square feet of buildable space, up to 10,000 residential units, and buildings rising up to 950. So we shall see. As we turn in front to our south, are 2 train bridges. The one that's more vertical is not used anymore, 1930. On the angle, 1918, still used. Beyond that, Chinatown and Ping Tom Park. As we turn, a nice view of the downtown skyline to our north that we'll pick up momentarily. We'll be going to the city and tour. And again, welcome to Chicago. And don't forget, this is the last tour on this boat tonight, so if you want something from the bar, do so now or forever hold your cup.
We were looking at the one like the pink one, the round one.
Round dome ones.
Yes.
And now it's red. That one's over there. For the Face this way. This way. Okay, go, go, go.
It's kind of hard to believe, but not that hard to believe that back in 2000, almost 95% of the tall buildings to our right or to our east did not exist. That was called the South Loop. It's mainly residential, not done yet. Tall white building to our right called Nema. As of right now, the tallest apartment building SW Shoes and all those shops, Red Beacon on top. Again, that's a part of the Chicago Fire Academy, where the city trained firefighters. What's ironic about the Fire Academy over there is its location. It sits on the same site as to where Mrs. O'Leary's house and barn at one time stood. If any of you know the story of the Great Chicago Fire, you know the irony of that. The fire began in her barn October 8th, 1871. Burned for about 36 hours, killed more than 300 people, burned down more than 17,000 structures, and ruined roughly 1/3 of the city, the size we were at that time. just to give you a scope to how damaging and devastating it really was, her house was located at roughly Jefferson and DeKalb. DeKalb was like 1000 South. Fire burned north all the way to Fullerton Avenue. That's 2400 north. That's 3.5 miles north of where we are. Only a few buildings survived that fire, including Chicago Water Tower and Pumping Station at Michigan and Chicago, completed 2 years before the fire. That's 2 miles north. Old St. Pat's Church on Adams and Des Plaines Divide is disaster to ever happen in Chicago in terms of loss of life happened directly to our right coming up on the river, July 24th, 1915. It's called the Eastland disaster, E-A-S-T-L-A-N-D. Short version, boat tied up here to our right. Was going to take 2,500 people to Michigan City for their picnic. The vessel always had ballast and ballast tank problems. They added extra lifeboats. It was 3 years at the Titanic, top heavy, unstable, not designed very well. They rolled over onto its side right here in the river, killing more than 800 people, 25 whole families. Again, July 24th, 1915. Part of the city's history, part of the river's history. As we clear Clark, you're to our right coming up, gonna have pediments above the doorways, pediments on top, kind of reminds you of a Greek temple or a government building. Postmodern, 1992. 77 West Wacker, Ricardo Bofill of Spain, Gil de Stefano of Chicago. Clad with an abundance of white Portuguese granite. If you ever saw The Negotiator with Samuel Jackson, you recognize this building. If you have not, you should. It's a really, really good movie. He stepped down one of the brutalist and somewhat stubby 55 West Wacker, 1968. Initially home to Blue Cross Blue Shield, I think it's not this office condo. So bless you. So this kind of reminded me of the giant pound sign or hashtag on the telephone. But do notice how the corners and roof line on 55 are being respected by the building to its left. In 35 West Wacker, 1989. Kevin Roche, John Dinkeloo. That is headquarters to Leo Burnett, the advertising firm giving us all icons like Tony the Tiger, Jolly Green Giant, and Pop. Have time, sit down, sit back, relax, have a glass or two. I don't say much about the hotel here to our right because for me, kind of ruins the street wall. Everything else is nice and flush against the sidewalk. That building is set back, and personally, I just don't like the design. I've never gone, but the Witt Hotel that's to our right, State and Lake by Jackie Koo. It's a rooftop bar. About a block and a half to our right, to our south, down State Street, that great street that had the Chicago Theater from 1921 by Rap and Rap. Landmarks inside and out. It's very pretty. The lights are not on right now. We need to make some adjustments, but as we clear State Street to our right, coming up in that gap, kind of looks like a sharpened pencil or a rocket ship about to blast off. Prudential Plaza, number 2, 1990. Spires on buildings like that work fine. Nice street walk to our right coming up of buildings side by side. Very slender neo-Gothic building, initially called Mather Tower, named for Alonzo Mather, a railroad baron. It was going to be a twin on Michigan Avenue. The Great Depression said, nah. Now it's a hotel. Skinniest skyscraper in Chicago. Wedged in there like a cap after a root canal is an addition for the building right next door. Initially, the London Guarantee and Accident Building, 1923. Back in the day, London Guarantee and Accident sold maritime insurance. Back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, very popular jazz club and a base called London House. Building's been renovated, now a hotel called London House. Have time while you're here, visit the rooftop bar. Again, great views. Well, the buildings to our right now rise. 1803 at this spot was constructed Fort Dearborn. And Fort Dearborn was the westernmost government outpost other than United States. But now to our left, so near Michigan Avenue, now coming into view, the elegant Gothic Revival Tribune Tower, 1925.